So the scientific process is a way to find out the truth about the natural world. We observe the natural world, and that makes us raise questions about things we would like to understand better. And these questions might even be raised about things that we thought we already had understood before. Perhaps we're trying to find a better way of understanding them. After we do that, based on what we know so far, or our research, or background knowledge, and our observations, we make inferences or assumptions about the way that we think the natural world works. And these assumptions are used to generate hypotheses, which are predictions about relationships that exist between things in nature. And of course, this all takes a lot of creativity to even find out what to ask about, to how to interpret the things we already know about, and how to put it all together to make predictions to try to explain the way that the universe works. Based on these hypotheses, though, science has to test them to see if we are actually found the answer for the question or not. And so we do things like experiments. Hopefully that's what we want to do, so we can get the empirical evidence, that evidence that's substantial and that we can imply causation. We can say that A causes B. But sometimes we can only do models or surveys or observational studies, correlational studies, things which can't really imply causation. We can only say that A is related to B. Regardless of which way we do it, we will gather data and then analyze that data to try to understand that data, to see what it says. Is it trustworthy? What is the data actually saying? We do statistics, we do logic, analytical thinking, and then we draw conclusions from this data. Now, this conclusion may defend the hypothesis or not. It may reject the hypothesis or fail to reject the hypothesis. I'll talk more about that. It means in a second. If, in truth, the hypothesis was failed, we have to reevaluate and start the process over. But if the hypothesis was failed to be rejected, that means that the results could not disprove the hypothesis, which is what really you set out to do. You never set out to prove the hypothesis. You set out to try to disprove it. So you collect data with the mindset that let's see if this is wrong. And if it's not, you can't say it's right. You can just say it's the best we got right now. Other science will pick that up and do what is called peer review. They will analyze the way you did things. They will analyze your thinking. They will analyze your methods. They will analyze your data, your conclusions. And they will try to replicate your experiment. They will try to apply your experiment to technology that can be used to improve the world. And this process of peer review will then build the scientific knowledge. And over time, as what you learn from your experiment becomes more and more tested and more usable, it becomes part of the scientific knowledge, which adds now to the background of what we know, and it's going to inspire future experiments in the future. So you see how it's a vicious cycle. And in fact, you can even question this in the future if you found better evidence. And this is how this all works. But as this passes many times, it becomes ingrained in science. And we call that empirical evidence. And then it can become what we call a scientific theory. And this theory might actually lead to the development of new hypotheses or new explanations about the universe. And usually theories encompasses several hypotheses about a phenomenon. Like, for example, evolution. A theory of evolution includes a lot of hypotheses about the way that life changes over time. And as these hypotheses continue to be tested by these processes, the theory grows and becomes more and more developed. And this may include scientific laws, which are statements which are almost invariably true and almost always are applicable, but they're basically hypotheses which have been tested so much that we now think that they are the way that the universe works. They're precepts of science. But remember that we're always willing to accept change. This is the scientific process, and this is how scientists go about learning more about the natural world and how science grows as a body of knowledge over time. But the interesting thing about science is that we never say that we found the truth. There's a really cool poem in my website about blind men touching an elephant. And I'm not going to read it just to save time, but you can read it on my website. But the interesting thing about that poem is that it basically says that if you put a bunch of blind men and have them touch the elephant at different parts of the elephant, one will maybe touch the trunk and think that he's touching a snake. Somebody else will touch the tusks and say it's a spear. Somebody else will touch the side of the elephant and will say, oh, it feels like a wall. Somebody might touch the ears and think it's like one of those old fans that you use to, when you're hot. Somebody might touch the tail and say it's a rope. And some might touch the legs and say it's the bark of a tree. Depending on which part of the elephant this person touches, he's going to interpret the elephant in a different way. Now, if the blind man never saw or touched the whole elephant, they might never believe what the other blind man is saying about the way the elephant is. And if they sit down to talk about what the truth is afterwards, they will forever argue with each other about what is it that they touched. And that each one of them will be hard-pressed to convince the other one that what they saw as the truth, or what they felt to be the truth, was indeed the truth. This is a philosophical argument that is used in philosophy to talk about what is knowing. And philosophy, science, religion, history, math, whatever you call it, our understanding of reality is based on what we can observe from that reality. But in science, what we can observe from reality is based on the tools that we have to collect and data from the reality. And those tools are based on the creativity that we had to develop them in the scientific method itself. Because remember, technology comes from application of the scientific method. So the tools themselves are based on the process. So that means that what we use to understand reality is based on our understanding of reality. So it's a vicious cycle in which we only know what we can know based on what we know. So, like blind men touching the elephant, we're trying to understand the world that's around us, but none of us actually have a full picture of reality. Just like different religions talk about different aspects of right and wrong, or different what is the truth, sciences are the same way. And this is actually funny, because now I'm actually comparing science to religion, although they're completely different ways of knowing. But it's true that when you're trying to understand something, you are limited by what you know about the way you go about understanding it. And so in science, we try to solve this problem by, instead of being like, this is the truth and I know it because I've seen it, I felt it, I collected the evidence on it. On the contrary, we are open-minded to talk to each other, to see what other people are saying about what the truth is, and trying to incorporate all the views of truth, all the body of evidence to get the best picture possible. So instead of affirming what the truth is based on only the experience that we have, science is open-minded enough to realize that the best way to understand the truth is to look at all the aspects of it. And that's why usually scientists look at something from many perspectives. So that's why in science, several people will usually work together to try to understand the phenomena, and several fields of study can actually look at the same phenomena from a different perspective, and it actually makes us understand the phenomena better. So for example, if you want to understand why someone does something, you can look at it biochemically, you can think about evolutionary science, you can look at it behaviorally, you can look at it as a neuroscience to see what your brain made you do, you can think about psychology, which is like, think about the cognition or the emotions that led you to do that. You can look at the chemistry that happens inside the brain, you can look at the physics of the behavior. There's different ways of looking at the phenomena. And to try to understand a phenomena best, it's better to incorporate all of these views, and that's why science is a multidisciplinary way of studying. And it's also why in science we never say that things are right. We say that things are not wrong. You never say that the data prove the hypothesis or support or confirm the hypothesis. You just say that it failed to reject the hypothesis, because you're willing to accept that it takes a lot of effort from a lot of people and a lot of data to make a knowledge, and that this knowledge can change if future research finds better tools that show better data, and perhaps with a creativity somebody can see a different way of interpreting something that was already pretty much accepted before. So although science is hard to change because it's based on a lot of evidence and a lot of discussion, a lot of debate, and therefore it's really hard to challenge the scientific knowledge, it takes a lot to change it. It is at the same time open to change, which means you can trust scientific knowledge because it's automatically the best thing that we know about so far, based on all of this evidence, all this peer review, all of this discussion that happened. And it's also based on the concept that you can change it. So it's not like you're going to be set in stone and it's going to be like blinded to the data that's going to be presented in the future. Science actually invites this change. It accepts criticism, it accepts skepticism, it wants to challenge both the old and the new. It accepts the scrutiny because of the whole right versus not wrong thing. We're never right, we're just not wrong. The debate, the replications, the logical thinking, the argumentation, the considerations of alternative data, of the explanations, of the methods that were used, of the conclusions that people drew, people replicating the experiments, expanding on the experiments, challenging the sources of evidence, challenging the evidence itself, the methods that were used, looking at the accuracy, reliability, validity. These are all things that science are constantly doing. Scientists are learning from either right or from wrong. When you fail an experiment, you learn what's not the truth. When you get it right, you get a step closer to the truth. Since science is the result of such a great process of debate, you can know that it's a durable knowledge, it's trustworthy knowledge because it's the best we have so far. And that means that it withstands the changes of time, but at the same time, it is willing to change if new data is presented. So it's both robust, durable, and open to change. And that's what makes scientific knowledge so powerful, and what makes science such a special way of knowing and such a great way of thinking. Something you can use to solve little problems in life, like finding out the best recipe, or big problems in life, like finding a cure for cancer. Science is at the front end of technology, and technology is inspired by science. And that's why it's so important, because it changes society, and it's part of what makes us better. Human beings that are constantly challenging the great beyond and improving our existence. So that's science, and I hope you learn a lot about it.